Joe Pyeweed is another beautiful plant that stands rain gardens perfectly well. And there's swamp aster and swamp goldenrod. There's swamp rose. I mean, they all sound horrible, right? Swamp something. It's like calling it something weed, butterfly weed. That makes it sound bad. But these are all beautiful plants that deserve a place in your garden. You probably already have a bunch of them in your garden. It's amazing the problems that you can solve with rain gardens. We expanded in the back to create a sitting area, and we hit a spring. And water was pouring out, this much water all the time. So we channeled it around the back of the wall, down the side of the house. At the same time, the guy found that his basement was flooding. Not because of us, they just noticed that the floor was wet. And they ripped it up, and there was water flowing across under the flooring. So they actually ended up going deep down and putting in gravel. So now, this much water all the time was directed at the side of the house. So where am I going to put all this water? So we built a series of ponds. And it's difficult to see, but that catch basin is actually raised. It's at the top of that berm. And so only in a heavy rainfall event does that bottom pond fill up. Now it doesn't look like much, right? We just built it in that picture. But you can see there, new, not so new, and then once it is established for a few years. And we were able to plant a stilby in that little creek, and we were able to plant candelabra primrose, which is a really cool plant, plus the traditional stuff. We even put in inkberry holly around the catch basin to hide the ugly catch basin. So you can do amazing things with these gardens. The simplest way to create a rain garden, super, super easy. Again, can't say it enough, rubber liner to get the water away from the house. I care about your house. By the way, interesting little factoid. Why do you want to do this? For the first time in history, flooding has overtaken fire as the leading cause of damage to homes. So it's really important. If we all work together to hold water on our property and infiltrate it, that's going to help protect the whole community from flooding. If everybody does a little bit of this, then it's going to protect the whole community, and we have to. Storms are getting weirder and wilder, so we can work together to prevent that. So all we did here is we dug a nice shallow trench across the whole front of that garden, and we planted it with cool things like Louisiana iris, really nifty plant. And that, when the water flows, it fills that. It wicks up into the garden, it wicks into the lawn, and if it overflows, and now she has pretty sandy soil, so it never does, but if it overflowed, then it would just flow onto the grass and get soaked up there. So you can actually do a lot just with that simple method. You don't even have to change the design other than to take into account the plants that stand seasonal flooding. And the list, as you see, is phenomenal. So a lot of people have a challenge now, like that picture up there with the cedar trees. Every spring, this lady's garden floods. Part of that is because each of the neighbors raise their yards. Oh, we don't want it wet, and mowing that swale is a pain. We'll just fill it in. Don't fill it in. For starters, you can't. You're not allowed to. And secondly, you can do something phenomenal. These other shots are of the garden that we created to hold and infiltrate that water. And it's beautiful. Again, Bowles golden sedge I'm a big fan of that plant. The blue flag iris. You can plant trees like birch and larch. You can even get dwarf larch if you want smaller things in that beautiful yellow fall color that it has. So there are all the list of plants to use is phenomenal. You don't need a list that big to design a garden, but having access to all these cool different things that you can plant is pretty nifty. This garden here was one of the very first bog gardens that we did, and that takes rainwater, cleans it, and dumps it in the pond. People, for some reason, are terrified of algae in their pond. So, fair enough. If you pump a little bit of the water always into the bog, then the bog is always taking up the extra nutrients and dumping it back in the pond, and that means that you won't have algae get out of control. Now, what we did here as well is the back corner flooded all the time, so we dug a pit and put in sort of a glorified bucket and a sump pump in there, just the old-fashioned thing that's in your basement, so that when that pit fills with water, it turns the pump on, pumps the water into the bog, and again, the bog cleans the water and dumps it into the pond. So now she doesn't have the flooding, and she doesn't have a problem filling her pond as often, which is great. Anything you can do to lower your water bill municipalities are trying to keep your tax dollars low. Water is one of the most expensive things that they do for you. So the less you use water, the better. So they're starting to charge what water costs. If you can save water this way, that's so much the better. This nice lady, she had a problem with her path icing up because the downspout just dumped onto the path. So how are we going to solve that? We built a channel across the top and put a rubber liner in it and dumped it off into the hedge. The cedar hedge loves all that water, and it soaks it in. It doesn't even make it to the road. The cedars just soak it up. This is a bioretention garden that we did, an engineered garden at Green Glade School in Mississauga, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's on pure sand soil, and yet it was designed as an English cottage garden. So don't think that you're limited by what you have. I know it sounds cliche, but a challenge is just a design opportunity. Right? If you have super dry shade, if you have a super wet area, if you have a dry, sunny hillside, it just means that you get to have fun planting things like cacti and ornamental grasses on that dry hillside. There are 4 different species that I know of hardy cacti in Ontario, native to Ontario. I have 7 different species of cacti in my garden. I have 7 different species of bamboo. Like, it's fun to plant cool different things. And they all have a purpose. So here we just dug a great big hole. We filled it with that mix of 10% compost and 90% sand, and then we channeled water off the roadways because they'll clean the salt and hold the salt and so on, and clean all the stuff that comes off our cars like oil and brake dust. Plants are wonderful at what's called bioremediation, using nature to clean water, using life to clean water. This is a pure sand planting at the corner of Royal York and Bloor, roughly, in Toronto. Not where you'd expect to see an English cottage garden. Not where you would expect to see a garden that's grassless on pure sand, and there's a bioswale in front, which is a really fancy way of saying ditch, but we planted it all up with beautiful plants, and like cardinal flower, and sedge grasses, and sweet fern, which isn't a fern at all. That's the problem with common names. Comptonia is a wonderful plant. Bayberry, sweet gale. These are perfect plants, and those are super salt tolerant. I actually saw a bayberry growing in Nova Scotia on the North Shore within easy reach of the salt spray, and it was happy as could be. It was a beautiful plant. So there's a plant for every situation. You can get really involved, and it's good that corporations and so on are, and towns are. They're building these massive rain-holding gardens and cisterns and so on to use water on the property. They're getting better and better. If all you do is get rid of impervious surfaces, so this was a garden that we did. We've done a fair bit of work for HGTV, for Carson Arthur, and back when there was still a G in HGTV. There's not much gardening there anymore, but so we lifted all that asphalt and then put in a garden to replace it. So that was all we did, and that made the world a much better place. It also made what was really an unwelcoming area at the Working Women's Support Center a destination in the neighborhood. People would sort of scuttle by and hide their face from the horrible landscape, and now people come and sit there. It's turned out quite beautifully. This was replacing an asphalt driveway with the black granite and then building a landscape around it that was beautiful. This is very simple, but it means less impervious surface, more area that the rain can soak in. You can buy permeable pavers that are engineered with a gap in them, and then you just fill it. We use the black granite gravel, and you fill that with the gravel, and then the rain soaks in there. You put a deeper base on it, and you use clear gravel so it holds the water. So again, I mean, that's, well, I'm kind of bragging here, but I think that's very beautiful. It's not a sacrifice. By doing these things, by the way, if, again, I know you don't only care about money, but if all you cared about was money, a quality permeable patio raises the value of your house by 12%.